Dear friends, good evening. Thank you everyone for joining us to our pre-chamber lecture series. Let's have a conversation tonight on the subject matter of cosmic laws. This is a really good topic, and tonight we're going to cover around 24 of these cosmic laws. In prior lectures, we have stated that as we operate in this realm of three dimensions, that we are governed by 48 laws. And the question that we get always is, are these laws part of those 48? And in addition to these, what else is out there? Well, yes, and more. But we can only share so much in the little time that we have here available. Of course, everything that we source and provide is directly from the teachings of Samael. We are not going to be trying to make our own effort and just try to give you more than what Samael is giving, because he gave so much for a specific purpose. So we are here just to continue offering what Master Samael has left behind for us. And as you continue meditating, you will come across and have a better understanding on additional laws that govern this realm in which we exist, move, and carry our personality and our consciousness. Let's start with the law of universal magnetism. This law of universal magnetism is influenced for us by Archangel Uriel. Uriel is the love of God. This is what Uriel is, the soul of that organism in our solar system that is known as the planet Venus. And the law of universal magnetism is part of what unifies together the great life. Here, in this realm in which we exist, well, we have vibration, because certainly everything moves, everything is in constant motion, nothing goes static. But we also have magnetism to allow for interactions to take place. These interactions are not only at the level of subatomic particles. The law of magnetism influences the transactions, the dynamics, the conditions that exist among our values, the good ones and the bad, the positive ones and the negative ones. And of course, we have electricity, and because we have electricity, because we have magnetism, we have electricity, and because we have vibration, we have movement, and we also have light, and we also have heat. This universal law of magnetism allows for the manifestation of prana. And prana is the life-giving force. It is the breath of life. It is indeed the fire of the fire. And from prana, the different transformations of the substance result in what the book of Genesis refers to as the waters from above. These waters from above are known in Hebrew as the Shamayim. They are also known in Hindu as the Akash. And the Akash vibrates, and it goes through its subsequent transformations. The first transformation of Akash that we see is ether. And you have seen ether every morning and every evening as you look far into the mountains. You notice that beautiful hue of blue that exists in the atmosphere. That is what it is. But as that ether continues undergoing its transformations, the different vibrations of the ether are known as tattvas. And then there are vibrations of Akash that result in the element of fire, that is known as Tejas. There are vibrations of Akash that, as it continues condensing, result in air, that is known as the vibration of, or the Tattva Vayu. There is a vibration that condenses as water, that is known as the Tattva Apas. And ultimately, there is a vibration that condenses as the element of earth, that is known as the Tattva Prithvi. So the law of universal magnetism is responsible not only for everything that is, has been, and will be. It is also responsible for the interactions of our values, both the positive ones and the negative ones. Then there is the law of the divine three. or the Holy Three. This law is known as the law of the Tria Mashikamno. Tria indicates that it is three. And the law of Tria Mashikamno enables the manifestation of creations. Because this law of the three combines a positive force and a negative force, one that projects and one that allows to receive, and a third force that is neutral in nature and conciliates the previous two. So we have man and woman, or masculine and feminine principles, and between them, that neutral law is the law of love. It conciliates them and enables then the manifestation of creation. But in the law of three, we find many other things. We find the holy affirmation, the holy negation, the holy conciliation. We find the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We find the holy God, the holy foundation, the holy immortal. All of this exists within the divine three. And here, in terms of what we can refer to as matter, for the sake of our senses, comprehending what that is, we see also the fundamentals of electricity: positive charge, negative charge, and the neutral charge. Now, I'm going to invite you to look at these laws. So you may be taking notes, and take these notes into meditation. Because as you bring these laws into meditation, you will find opportunities in which you can benefit from these natural laws of creation. The next law is the law of the Holy Seven. And this law is known as the law of the Epta Paraparshinok. The law of three creates, but every creation that emerges is chaotic. It must be organized. And the law of seven comes to organize the chaos that emerges out of the Triyamashikamno. So this law that brings organization has materialized things that are very common for us as we are here wandering around space in this organism that is planet Earth. Because we have 7 original planets, which are known as the 7 planets of alchemy. From this perspective, planet is not only associated to that body that orbits a star like a sun. Here, we're speaking about a planet in its original definition as a wanderer, or the thing that wanders through space. From that perspective, the 7 fundamental planets are the Moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. From these 7 planets, we see the emergence of the 7 days of creation, because these planets are associated to the 7 days. So we see Monday as the day of the Moon. We see Tuesday, or Mars Day, as the day of Mars. We see Wednesday, or Mercredi, in French, the day of Mercury. We see Thursday as Thor's Day, the day of the god Thor or Jupiter. We see Friday as Vendredi, or the day of Venus. And we see Saturday as the day of Saturn, Saturn Day. Beyond that, knowing that the universe expresses itself in this beautiful symphony, we also see seven musical octaves. We see 7 fundamental dimensions of nature. Well, of course, we have 1, 2, and 3 starting in the underworld, and the third one here where we exist. But then there is the 4th dimension that encompasses the ethereal plane. There is the 5th dimension that encompasses the astral and the mental plane. There is the 6th dimension that encompasses the causal plane in the tree of life, the sphere of Tiferet. And beyond that, we see the 7th dimension where we find the innermost, our real being, meaning the Father of our Father, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And beyond that, the absolute, the unmanifested space, the uncreated light. We see the Holy Seven, and in there we find the 7 basic vowels of nature. E, E, O, U, A, and then the letters M and S. Each one of these letters resonates within each one of the magnetic centers in our body. So the letter I, or E, resonates in the chakras of the head. the letter E with the chakra of the creative larynx, the letter O in the heart center, the letter U in the solar plexus, the letter A in the chakras of the lungs and in the thymus gland, in the heart. And then we have the letter M that allows for the vibration of our creative waters, enabling transmutation, and the letter S that is the sound of the fire of our Divine Mother Kundalini. We also see 7 sacred words in this acronym called Vitriol, which means look within your interior earth, and by rectifying, you will find the hidden stone, which is work that invites of us to inquire within, to analyze, to comprehend our defects, and to eliminate them so that we can fabricate the stone of the philosophers. Of course, with the law of the 7, we also have 7 bodies. We have the physical and the vital body, and these two together allow us to exist here. But beyond that, the vital body, we have the astral, the mental, and the causal body. And beyond the causal body, there is the body of the spiritual soul of the innermost, and ultimately, the body of Atman. These 7 bodies are those bodies that when we work in the super dynamic of love, they become the to soma heliakon, or the golden wedding dress, the solar garments, the solar wedding dress of our innermost. And in terms of 7, we have 7 variations of the fire of the Divine Mother. These are the 7 degrees of fire. These are the serpents of fire that must be raised in each one of the 7 bodies through the super dynamic of love. And also, and we will leave it here, the 7 races that every planet is responsible of delivering. 7 races, of which we are the 5th one, and of the 5th race, we happen to be the 7th sub-race of the 5th great race. So this is just a little bit on the law of the Epta Paraparshinok. Now, the law of karma. Certainly karma has been misunderstood. Many people thrive in seeing others suffering, and they will gladly say, it's karma, but we shouldn't be that cruel, because certainly the great law characterizes itself for being perfect justice, perfect mercy. The great law will not give any one of us any more than when we owe, or will not demand from us anything more than what we must pay back. So this law of karma is a medicine that we are given to help awaken the consciousness, to let the consciousness become aware of the consequences of its creations. But this law of karma is a law of cause and effect. From that perspective, yes, every action with its reaction is karma. But we cannot just be so simplistic. We need to understand that this is a law of action and consequence. And from that perspective, allow us to share with you the one law. Do as you wish, but remember that you will be held accountable for all of your actions. In terms of the law of karma, there is no cause without an effect. And at the same time, there is no effect without a cause. If you are going through some difficult circumstance, those circumstances are not random. They are not happening by coincidence. It is not just chance. There is no spontaneous generation of chaos. Certainly, if we're experiencing something, there are reasons, causes behind them. And Samael tells us, change the cause and you will change the effect. Alter the cause and you will alter the effect. So if we killed in a past life, it is likely that we're going to get killed in this one. If we hurt others in a past life, it is likely that we're going to be hurt in this one. If we were unfaithful before, it is likely that somebody will be unfaithful to us now. So we cannot see this as destiny. We cannot just see this as something that is just carved there, because one thing that is the law of karma is that it is merciful. And what this says is that we can change our karma. Karma is not carved in stone, provided that there are some exceptions. If we commit crimes against the Holy Spirit, that is karma that must be paid. That karma is non-negotiable. If we are currently paying karma, karma that is currently being paid must be paid. That karma is no longer negotiable. But whatever karma is accumulated for us, we can certainly negotiate it. And to negotiate karma, Samael shares with us a few hints. He tells us we need to fight the lion of the law with the scale. This means that we must focus in the three factors of the revolution of the consciousness. We need to seek to eliminate those inferior aspects of us, because all of that work constitutes sacrifice, sacred office. We must seek to enable the birth of the faculties of the innermost within us. That means that we have to break ways with our old habits. That means that we must change our way of thinking. That means that we must exercise kindness, compassion with our brethren, with our neighbor. And in that same light, we must learn to sacrifice for humanity. So if you are suffering hunger today, help others alleviate their hunger. If you are suffering from lack of job, then let's help others try to find a job themselves. Maybe you can help them fill an application. Maybe you can help them look for a job. Maybe you can help them connect their abilities with the opportunities that exist there. Everything counts. Everything is important. And when we do this, we accumulate of these good deeds on the scale. And when we tilt the scale in our favor, the lion of the law sees us with mercy, with compassion. So we must do good deeds. We must sacrifice for others. We must alter our destiny. And when we do that, by virtue of the death of the ego, the birth of the virtues, and sacrifice for humanity, then we start bringing good luck into our lives. This is just a brief summary on karma. We will speak more about this one in a later lecture. Then there is the law of return. The law of return states that all things go back to their point of origin. And we see this in the seasons, we see this in the days of the weeks, we see this in the tides, we see this in the law of the pendulum, in our moods. We see all of this consistently. But what the law of return also tells us is that a man is what his life is. We will come back after this life, and the great law will deposit our soul once again in a new womb. This means that as we extenuate this current life, death itself, that phenomena, is going to become a gate to the principle of life. And because everything goes back to its point of return, we will come back into a new womb, and we will restart once again that roll of film that was our past life. The reason for this is because in our life, our consciousness remains trapped within the ego. There are many speculations about how much consciousness, free awakened consciousness, exists in each and every one of us. And we should really make an effort to not get caught in, do I have 1% or 5% or 10%? We should never get caught in things like that. But the whole purpose of the law of return is give the consciousness an opportunity, so that the consciousness can once again relive all of those actions, so that it becomes aware of its own creations, so that it can see how is it that it benefits, contributes, or affects others around it. This is one of those main reasons why we have this law. Because the law of return brings us into a new womb. That means that the law of return brings our egos back into action when we have our new body. And the moment that that child emerges from the womb of the mother and takes its first breath, it is at that moment that the consciousness penetrates the body. But the ego does not. The ego remains hovering around the creature and slowly penetrates into the body. All of you who have seen an infant, seen a toddler, you know that as the cranium seals itself, well, the different plates, bone plates that make up the cranium itself, well, as they start joining and coming together, rewelding themselves, the last part is this door of Brahmarandra at the very top of the head. It is in that area, through that zone, where we find this gateway, this door that leads to the pineal gland, etc. We see that the ego comes into the body, and by the time that the child is 2 years old, by the time that door of Brahmarandra closes, well, we see then that the ego has penetrated into the body of the child. So now this should explain to you why is it that you must live, that maybe you live in a household where everybody is making a sincere effort to be honest and sincere, to be truthful, and suddenly you have a small child that is 1.5, 2 years old, and is an expert at lying. Well, it's an expert because it has brought with itself all of those psychological aggregates that gained their expertise in the previous lives. So how is it that we can rid ourselves of the influence of the law of return? Friends, only through the awakening of the consciousness. And we are given an opportunity to awaken our consciousness, not only with every breath and every day that we live, but the law of recurrence is given to us as a tool so that we can understand what is going to be happening in our lives, so that we can prepare ourselves and having adequate forewarning, that we can then walk into circumstances with a greater understanding. The law of recurrence states that everything that happened before will happen again, but it will happen again with consequences, both the good ones and the bad ones. We know very well that our values, the positive and the negative ones, they attract and repel themselves within the astral light by virtue of the law of universal magnetism. So egos of lust will attract each other. Egos of anger will attract each other. And, of course, some values, like values of altruism, values of kindness, the positive egos that we have of the Gnostic student, well, those will repel inferior negative egos like lust and anger and greed and gluttony. Because these values attract and repel themselves, these values also have the ability to communicate telepathically. The law of return brings us back into the tapestry of existence. The law of recurrence makes sure that the events that happened before happen once again. So this law provides for the right causes and conditions for your positive or negative values to communicate telepathically with their positive and negative values, and as a function of time for these egos to converge when the right causes and conditions are present. This is why a man who was unfaithful to his wife at 35 in the past life, well, he will come once again in this life, and at the age of 35 will repeat the same mistake. These egos will seek to satisfy their own commitments. And these egos are the foundation of the law of recurrence. We said this law is given to us so that we can be forewarned of what's going to happen. And yes, as we continue advancing in our studies, we will start working with elemental magic. And there is an elemental magic that we will practice with the elemental, the soul of the plant of the peppermint. And this elemental is a very powerful elemental that has the ability to show us our past lives. So if you want to have a good understanding on what is happening now and why, well, we can work with this elemental, submerge ourselves in meditation, and we will be able to see by the faculties of imagination, intuition, and inspiration, what are those events, so that we can correlate them to what is happening to us today, and that we can take the right action with right thought and right feeling. Okay, Samael tells us, eliminate the actors and the dramas will disappear. When we eliminate our defects, we slowly start disconnecting from the law of recurrence. When we eliminate all of our defects, we can break away from the influences of the law of return, and rather than being brought back by decree of the law in that mastery, then we will have an opportunity to reincarnate. Then we will have an opportunity to determine, with the guidance of the innermost, under which zodiac we should be born to accomplish certain missions here for humanity and for the innermost. There is a law of falling, and this is the law of bottom stability. The tiger of Turkestan is quoted with this: everything in the universe falls towards a bottom, and that bottom, everywhere you go, is the most proximal point of stability. That is, the point where all of the lines of the forces converge as they flow from all directions. The center of the suns and of the planets are these bottom centers of stability. It is at that center point where equilibrium manifests, allowing the sun and the planets to hold their positions. So, when things fall in space, regardless of where that may be, they drift towards this or that sun, or this or that planet, according to which part of space belongs to that sun or belongs to that planet, making of that particular sphere, whether a sun or a planet, the bottom or source of stability. This law is a fundamental law in interstellar travel. And those great beings, as we have learned in the lecture, the mission of the extraterrestrials is they visit from one galaxy or another. They guide themselves based on this law of bottom stability. In our case, as we exist here in planet Earth and the influences that exist in the cosmos, well, we see the law of gravity. And the law of gravity has both an internal and an external aspect. As we exist in the planet being a mesocosmos, meaning in this realm where the organization brings everything into equilibrium, well, this planet is the mathematical point where all of the lines of force that are sourced from all directions converge. And then the forces of evolution and involution, they balance themselves at the very center of the planet. We arrive here in a wave of monads. We embark with the law of evolution, and we reach the peak of that evolution when we receive our first physical body. At that moment, and not before, we let go of that law of evolution, and from the moment our first life starts, the law of involution comes into play. It requires of us a conscious effort to take a leap to the other side and break free from the influence of the law of involution. If we don't, we will go through 10, 20, 50, 100 lives to a maximum of 108. And if we have not achieved mastery by that 108th life, the law of involution will take us and take all of our values and deliver them into the inferior realms of the earth, what is known as the Avicii, the Inferno, hell, and the catabolic forces of nature will take care of destroying everything that we did not destroy here consciously and voluntarily. Then there is the law of the pendulum. In ancient times, there was no such a thing as a dogma of evolution. All the wise men understood that there were processes that would take place and manifest according to the law of the pendulum. We know that the pendulum swings from one side until the next one. And this tells us, without a doubt, that the law of the pendulum is entirely mechanical in nature. So there is flow and reflow. There is rise and there is fall. There is birth, there is death, there is happiness, there is sadness, hope, and desperation. There is triumph, there is defeat. And we have gone through all of these stages. We can become independent from the law of the pendulum. And to become independent of this law, it is necessary that we awaken consciousness. This is why Samael gives us the key of SOL. Because with the key of SOL, we start setting ourselves, empowering the consciousness in such a way that we can become observers of causes and circumstances around us. That key of SOL empowers us to stand at the very center of the circle of Tao. And from there, to be able to look one side and in the direct opposite direction and see happiness, sadness, hope, desperation, and to simply contemplate and not allow ourselves to be dragged by the pendulum itself. Samael says a moment of great happiness is inevitably followed by a moment of great sadness. This law of the pendulum is mechanical. We must become independent from this law. This is why we must seek to stand at the center of the circle of Tao. But not just that. We must be there to perceive, to contemplate our defects, to see how is it that they transact with each other, to understand what is their structure, to see what is the signature that they leave at the level of the body, to see which are defects that are manifesting because they are defects that we have carried for endless lives, to see what are defects that are essentially new. And with all of that understanding, invoke of the power of our Divine Mother and see them eliminated. Then there is the law of the transmigration of the souls. We know that the being sends its human soul. A fraction of that soul, that is the consciousness, emerges from the innermost and it arrives into this tapestry of creation in waves. It starts in the mineral kingdom, and as it reaches mastery in that kingdom, it takes a leap into a higher kingdom where that soul experiences its first individuality as a plant. It goes through different cycles of development and education, and at that moment, as it reaches mastery in the plant kingdom, it takes a leap into the next kingdom of nature, which is the animal kingdom. Not only that soul now has had the experience of individuality, now it is capable of dealing with bodies that are more complex in nature. In addition to that, it has the ability to experience rudimentary emotions. Once that soul achieves mastery in the animal kingdom, then it takes a leap and it enters into the human kingdom where the Divine Mother rewards that soul with the first human body. And now, not only we are dealing here with emotions and complex bodies, now we also have the ability to deal with concept. Now we have the ability to deal with the transmutation of our creative energies that would allow us to then take a leap into the very next realm, which is the angelic realm. This is the law of transmigration. The law of transmigration, working hand in hand with the law of evolution and involution, well, they create a very interesting scenario. Because if we get into the human kingdom and we are unable to dominate that concept, that intellect, if we are unable to or unwilling to transmute our creative energies in a way that serves the purpose of the being, well, we will then disconnect from this human body, descend into the spheres of hell to once again start at the mineral kingdom. In cosmic laws, we also have the Law of Solioonensius, and this is a law that has taken place, has materialized around 40 times since the sinking of Atlantis. The result here is caused by an electromagnetic strain between worlds. There is our solar system of Ors, and then there is a solar system of Baleoto. And Baleoto has this comet that is a massive celestial body called the comet Zolny. Zolny, well, it follows a specific orbit like any other comet, and it comes to a point in which it reaches a proximity to our solar system, and as it aggressively approaches our sun, it alters the electromagnetic forces of the sun of Baleoto as much as the electromagnetic forces of our sun here in the solar system of Ors. And the effect of this is reflected in all of the planets, but specifically within the psyche. It awakens a yearning for reunion. It awakens a longing for self-realization. But if the humanity is degenerated, the intense sense of a reunion, instead of being the religare of gnosis, which seeks the consciousness to reunite with the innermost, then what it does is that it brings psychological aggregates together by virtue of that law of magnetism. And we know that those conglomerates, they could be aggregates that are of a positive or of a negative nature. Once that happens in the longing for self-realization, that invites revolution. Instead of being a revolution that is internal, it becomes an externalized revolution. And we see wars, we see destruction. Something similar to what happened with the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, and likely the same experience that we are seeing at this moment, 100 years later, with the conflict that is happening in that area of Ukraine. Now, there is one law that is called the Law of Epigenesis. Epigenesis means the creation of something new. This is the law that governs the capacity to originate new circumstances. Now, this is a law that belongs to the innermost. There are many systems out there that invite you to develop the mind, to strengthen the mind, to crystallize your future by using the power of the mind. And we must tell you that that doctrine is a good doctrine for the purposes of satisfying the kinder of humanity. But one thing that we are seeking is to liberate ourselves from the mind. If we harden the mind, if we strengthen it, we are making our prison even so much more difficult for the consciousness to escape. What we must do is that we must seek to become instruments at the service of our Father who is in secret. When we work to eliminate our psychological aggregates, when we allow the innermost to be the dominant entity within the human machine, to be the one officiating in practices, to be the one protecting, guiding, educating, then the innermost, by virtue of the law of epigenesis, it can bring forth its superior principles and set for you a series of stepping stones where you would go through some difficulties. We know that we must go down before we can rise. And as we show mastery dealing with those circumstances, we slowly start transitioning into higher levels of being. The law of epigenesis goes hand in hand with the law of fate. The law of fate is what the innermost does when it takes us out of the scope of the law of accidents and we start embarking ourselves in a path of development of the consciousness that eventually can liberate us. So the law of epigenesis requires of conscious willpower. This is a law for authentic men. This is not a law that exists in our present condition. We must exercise the revolution of the consciousness, empower the innermost so that the innermost can do these things for us. If we don't do that, if we keep deciding randomly, if we just keep going with many failed logics and repeating the same mistakes, well, certainly we're going to remain bound to the law of destiny, not to the law of fate. There is a law called the Law of the Cosmic Common TROGOAUTOEGOCRAT. And if we can simplify this law is stating that everything nourishes from everything else. This speaks of reciprocal nutrition of all organisms. In our planet, well, we can see that the rabbit will feed itself from the grass, and eventually the eagle will feed itself from the rabbit. And when the eagle dies, it eventually becomes nourishment for the future grass that will feed many other rabbits. This very same cycle exists at a cosmic level. And planets nourish each other by virtue of their electromagnetic radiations. Copper, under the influence of positive and negative currents, well, it generates radiation, and the radiation of copper animates other metals. Those of you who have ever had family working in copper mines, you know that your family members, well, they get scanned every so often for radiation exposure. They have to carry specific tags that will detect if there has been an overdose of radiation at any given day. So copper, together with the many other metals, the radiation that they emit allows for these electromagnetic fields and for these forces to be distributed throughout the cosmos. So we nourish ourselves from the sun, from the planets in our solar system, and the electromagnetic energies that irradiate from planet Earth, well, they nourish the sun and they nourish the other planets in the solar system as well. So we see here an exchange. This law applies to us as much as it applies to the solar systems, to the galaxies, to the galaxy clusters, even to the dynamics across the dimensions. We also have the law of rounds. And based on the law of seven, that we know that the seven organizes, well, there are 7 planetary rounds. We know that every planet is responsible of delivering 7 races. Once the planet has satisfied that requirement, it has satisfied its mission and it eventually becomes a moon. As a cadaver, the soul of that planet returns to the absolute, and in a future cycle, perhaps a future cosmic day, that soul comes to inhabit another planet to continue with its development. In terms of rounds, there are 7 rounds. We have already learned in the flow of the current of sound, when we spoke about the ray of Okidanok, that as the ray of creation descends, there is a first manifestation that takes place in the realm of the mind. It condenses further into the astral plane. It condenses further in the ethereal plane, and finally it crystallizes, materializes in the physical plane, where we see physical and chemical condensation. Once we reach the physical plane, there is no further down, because here in this physical plane we have the third, the second, and the first dimension. So from here there is enough energy that is acquired with all of these experiences, where eventually these great beings reemerge, and they go from the physical plane once again into the ethereal manifestation, and from there into the astral space, and then into the mental space again. This diagram that you're seeing here is a diagram that we get from Elena Blavatsky's Cosmogenesis, if we're not mistaken. And here you can see the races of the 7 Earth period. So in the 4th round, in which we are seeing physical and chemical condensation, we see the root races: the polar, Hyperborean, Lemurian, Atlantean, and the 5th one, which is the Aryan race, knowing that we still have a 6th one, the Corali race, and the 7th race, that still have to populate the earth. Here we have 3 laws. Analogies, actually 4 laws. Analogies, opposites, the law of number, and the law of correspondences. And these are the laws that we use for the interpretation of dreams. In our dreams, the innermost communicates and communicates through symbols. And we can take those symbols and analyze them by the law of number. That one is very easy. So if you get certain number of coins, or if you see a clock on the wall, you can see those numbers. Or if you are in your dream and somebody tells you the price that you must pay for something, well, all these numbers are meaningful. And the law of number tells you what is the hidden teaching, the hidden meaning behind that. But then we have the law of correspondences. Correspondences tells you what happens here, well, the same things happen up there. As above, so below. And this is beautiful for us to understand what exactly is happening in those realms that our senses cannot perceive. The law of analogies, philosophical analogies, allow you to make good associations to understand what the symbols in the dream mean. So if you're seeing a car or a house or a horse, well, those are symbols of your physical body. If you see in a dream that you are walking with beautiful brand new shoes, well, that gives you an indication by virtue of analogies that you are walking comfortably, that you are on the right path. On the other hand, if you see yourself walking barefoot on a very difficult path, that may give you an indication of a reflection of what is happening in your life today. And last, we have the law of opposites. The law of opposites is quite fun, because in a dream, if you see yourself dancing and celebrating, well, that means that something is coming where you're not going to be dancing and celebrating. If you see yourself enjoying sweets like cake or candy, well, that is telling you that more sooner than later, something is going to happen here that is going to be sour. So these are the laws that we use. So meditation is necessary for us to understand what the dreams are telling us. We have already spoken of the laws of evolution and involution. These laws are sister laws. One cannot exist without the other, and they constitute the forces that set in motion the wheel of samsara. So we have on one side the law of evolution, and on the other we have the law of involution, and that is the law that is governing us today. So let's emphasize what we stated earlier. It requires of a conscious, willful effort so that we can get out of this condition and take a leap onto the next kingdom. There is the law of the equalization of multi-source vibrations. Wow, this is a mouthful. What this is a law that helps us understand that we need to bring harmony within our human machine. We need to develop the intelligent usage of the 3 brains of our body: the intellectual, the emotional, and the motor sexual instinctive. If we abuse of the physical cylinder of the machine, name it the motor center, we will see that our intellect is going to be affected, and we will see that our emotions will be affected. If we go through very difficult emotional circumstances and we take that emotional cylinder and we drain it of its values, our ability to think will be affected, and the physical body will pay the consequences of that drainage of emotions themselves. Those values that exist within these cylinders are known as Bodbin Caldenos. And there are several parables in which the apostles quote the great master Jesus, where, for example, a master decides to go out on a trip and he takes 3 of his servants and hands them certain number of values. These servants decide that they're going to do their own thing with these values. One of the servants takes those values, uses them wisely, and multiplies them. As a consequence, when the master returns, he allows that man, that servant, to keep all of those values so that he can continue to prosper. There is another one who uses part of it and safeguard the other. And then there is a last one that, afraid of losing what he had, he takes his values and he digs a hole and he hides them. And in this last one, that master decides to take away everything that he gave him and tells his other servants, tie this man and throw him outside, where the only thing that will be the crying and the gnashing of teeth. These values that we have been given in our intellect, in our emotional center, in our motor, sexual, instinctive centers, they must be cultivated. This is why Samael invites us to enjoy classical music, so that we can nourish our superior emotional center. He invites us to meditate so that we can calm down. He invites us to do the practice of brew time so that we can take benefit from those moments of rest, allow the physical body to recover, but also to focus the efforts into eliminating our psychological aggregates. So this is the law of the equalization of multi-source vibrations. This tells you that if you have been going through really harsh circumstances, you have been emotionally drained, friend, you need to go outside and you need to walk. You need to enjoy some light exercise. You need to read a good book. You need to listen to some good classical music. If your body is recovering from an illness, then it's in your best interest to engage in good literature, in good classical music, in good light exercise, so that you can bring harmony into your senses. Oh, then there is the law of accidents. But allow us to tell you this: not all accidents are the result of destiny. Not all accidents can be blamed on karma. Listen what Samael says. He says, 99% of traffic accidents are the result of imprudence. And we are imprudent. So these accidents, they are induced by the inferior laws created by mankind. We create adverse conditions. We take those adverse conditions because we can only see so far. We have positive values that they want to do good. But these positive values, they characterize themselves because they do good when that good shouldn't be done. They create problems. So we come up with so many laws. These laws create undesirable effects, and then those effects are not fixed. We just go and create more laws on top of that. And the result of this is the unconsciousness that we experience and the further degeneration of man. So to not be imprudent, we must focus on awakening the consciousness. And then we have the law of octaves. We already spoke about 7 octaves. But in the law of octaves, we see 7 recurrent notes. They repeat themselves in each one of the octaves. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, and si. We know very well that we have half tones, except in 2 specific locations of the 7-point scale, between mi and fa, and between si and the next octave, do. The law of octaves tells us that we will see difficulties arising in any endeavor that we initiate, and that those difficulties will require of us to invest of a deeper effort, of a more conscious initiative, so that we can continue our progression, because if we don't, then whatever progress we have made is going to degenerate, and eventually we're going to come back into our point of origin. So there are 2 shocks that are necessary in every octave. This is why you may start a project with a lot of energy. Suddenly your project, whether it is a home renovation or painting the house or helping someone or even a project at work, You initiate it and you start gaining a tremendous amount of momentum, and suddenly your project goes stagnant. We need to bring about a conscious effort. We need to go and look for what are the causes, the conditions, the circumstances, address them so that we can infuse life into the project once again so that it may continue. And then at the end, we must do the same to bring the flow of activities to a completion. Needless to say, those of you who have been project managers, we know very well that project closeouts are usually one of the sloppiest things that are manifested in any type of project out there, because it requires of an additional effort to bring it to a successful completion. So this is what the Law of Octaves is already pre-warning you on what you are going to find. So as you can see, we have only spoken of 24, 25 laws. It took us this long to be able to get here. And certainly there is much more that we could say, but the time is very limited. We want you to know that we source this material from all of these written works of Master Samael Aun Weor. And as always, we are super grateful to all these sources because from them we got imagery just to be able to glue this presentation together. Dear friends, this has been our conversation tonight on the subject matter of cosmic laws. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us this evening, and may all beings be happy.